Hello and welcome to another edition of the Mexican Soccer Show. I'm your host, Cesar Hernandez, and we're here to talk about the Gold Cup. We're here to talk about Liga MX, and of course, we're here to talk about El Tri. But before we get into that, let me first introduce tonight's guest. Over in Philadelphia, we have Jason Markowitz. Jason, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, some more Mexico games to talk about. Feels like this summer is the summer of never-ending Mexico games, but it's kind of fun at the same time. So we're keeping the train rolling here.
Yeah, man, it just never stops. I mean, sometimes it does feel like it's an actual club team with all those matches that are being played. Naib Moran over in Mexico City. Naib, how are you doing?
Houston, Cesar, we're in Houston. Buenas noches.
Oh my God.
And Jason as well. We'll be back to Mexico City pretty soon because as Jason has been saying, I mean, there's a lot of Mexico games going on, which takes away spotlight from the fact that Liga MX is just literally days away from starting. So that's going to happen soon. And of course, with all this stuff going on, we don't realize that many of the Liga MX teams are actually in the U.S. playing friendly games.
Yeah.
And it's interesting seeing all these teams preparing with the new signings and all that. But definitely, yeah, busy month and weeks ahead for us.
Yeah, completely forgot that you're back in Houston. My bad, man.
No problem.
All right, guys, I want to start off with the big question to lead the show. So here's a question. With weakened rosters for the U.S. and Mexico, what chance do you put on this being the Gold Cup where the duopoly is broken? And for those of you wondering about duopoly, when I went to Mexico's match yesterday at Qualcomm Stadium, they gave you a little media handbook, and they tell you about the trophies. It's pretty clear right there, that duopoly that we're talking about right there. Canada with a lone trophy from back in 2000. But let's go over to Jason. You know, what percentage would you put for this duopoly being broken?
You know, I think there's a pretty good case to be made that there's one of those teams could break through, and this can be one of those odd years where one of those trophies pops up somewhere else. But I don't think it's going to happen. I still think U.S. or Mexico is probably going to win it. U.S. is probably the favorites right now because I think they have like the stronger roster, and I think they're more likely to bolster the roster even further. But I still think Mexico is going to kind of win it. So I'm going to say it's like a 10% kind of maybe Costa Rica can pull something off here.
All right, Naib, do you agree? Do you think it's around a 10%? Do you think it might be higher?
I think I will go higher actually. I will go with 50%.
Whoa!
And give a shot to Costa Rica mainly because I do get. I mean, the fact that they got Brian Ruiz in the attack gives them that advantage. I would say. We'll see how many minutes Joel Campbell gets. He didn't start in the first match, but then some Costa Rican got injured, and then Joel Campbell came in, so that can change a little bit. It's interesting to see. I mean, I think once, of course, this tournament, as it's usually the case, it gets interesting in the quarterfinals, semifinals, when the knockout rounds come in, and that's when maybe Costa Rica, Mexico. That's going to be a big test for the Mexico team, considering that it's not the A team, and Costa Rica, for the most part, has a team with most of its star players.
For me, I'd probably go somewhere a little in between. I went with a 25%. I have to agree with Naib there. I actually agree with both of you right now. Actually, Naib for bringing up Costa Rica. I think you got to watch out for them just because that roster is still very strong, and we'll see. Yeah, when Mexico takes them on, because more than likely it'll be maybe in a semifinal or final. And then with Jason, of course, you got to bring up the fact that even though this is Mexico's B roster, I still think that it's quite strong, and of course there's a clear home.
Yeah, and let's not forget. I mean, it was a shaky start for the U.S. against Panama. Panama had a lot of great opportunities that could have put the score in favor of them, and of course Panama has been a team that has caused troubles not just to the U.S. but also to Mexico.
Yeah, we shouldn't forget about Panama, really.
What about French Guyana? Are they up there?
It's possible. You never know.
It's a diplomatic way of putting it there. Yeah.
All right, Jason, any interesting, good responses that we had online to that question?
There were a few here. Let me take a look. We have Jersey Jonathan on Twitter saying that he really likes the Ticos for the title and that they are due. As we saw, they don't have any Strider Zen said there's a 0% chance that the team wins it. So, okay. Someone with a Twitter name of Mexican Donas Trump. I don't really know what that means, but it's a registered trademark apparently, according to the Twitter handle. But he says that Mexico goes undefeated, and that Elias will be getting the golden ball after Mexico's undefeated in the Gold Cup. So there you go. And there are a few other people saying that Costa Rica are their team. If anyone's going to do it, it's going to be Costa Rica. So there's a lot of love for the Ticos here. A little bit of argument going back and forth about how we have Navas not in the team, and look at maybe it's a week in Costa Rica, but kind of there aren't really many others missing. And we have a few people in the chat now saying Pedro Joel Espinosa saying that if any team could do it, it's Costa Rica, and Luis Rodriguez also mentioning that Panama looked pretty good, as well as Afro Zander.
Interesting that Shaka Rodriguez himself.
Yes.
Saying that Costa Rica is
looking watching.
Watching. Just seeing what we're talking. He was hoping to get mentioned, so it's good.
Well, let's look over at Mexico now. Let's look over at the Gold Cup journey for Mexico, which just started yesterday in San Diego. Luckily, it was a very short drive for me. I just about like 3 miles that way for me to go over to Gold Cup Stadium. Mexico got a 3-1 win over El Salvador. To me, that was a victory that was expected from them. And I want to go over to Nayib on this. Your overall thoughts on last night's match.
Yeah, I mean, I think the start was kind of slow for El Tri. There was a shaky start in the defense, because keep in mind, I think Luis Reyes and Edson Alvarez both were coming from Russia, and they were integrated into this defense that had kind of been playing together for the past 2 weeks. Because actually with Pompilio Pais, he was using Chaka on the right, and he was using Gallardo on the left. And of course, that change happened in the second half. I don't know why he didn't keep on going with a defense that had been working in the past 2 friendlies, the one against Ghana, the one against Paraguay. But that's the decision that he made. Of course, we see that trend, that they put the center back like Edson Alvarez on the right back position. It's a tendency that we're just going to see with Osorio as his process moves along. The integration of a central defensive midfielder, something that we asked for throughout the Confederations now, was used adequately in the Gold Cup, and I think that allowed the offense to move freely. And I think there's questions in regards of who the striker is going to be in the team after Alan Pulido left injured. Cubo came into the rescue. Cubo didn't get minutes yesterday because he's integrating into the team barely, but Sepulveda's not a typical 9. He's more of a winger kind of a deal. And I was really intrigued, and I think I liked it, was playing with Rodolfo Pizarro as a false 9. And of course, we'll delve more into what Elias Hernandez provided and a stellar performance from his part. But, that was interesting how he ended that match without a natural striker in the 11.
Yeah. And then, Jason, to go off of what Nayib said on the sluggish start, this isn't something that, has been out of the ordinary recently for Mexico. We saw that the Confederations Cup, too. Is there anything that needs to change from El Tri, at least when it comes to preparation? What's going on here?
I kind of think maybe the pregame flagons of wine and things that they're drinking to kind of come out all tired and whatever is going on. I don't know, maybe that could stop. Just as a suggestion. But
that's a practical decision.
I think it just makes sense at this point. But other than that, I would say that I don't know. I kind of think it's just not something necessarily that Mexico is doing. And in fact, that I think they're susceptible to giving up goals at all times throughout the game. With the way these Mexico defenses, we've seen that trend carry over from the Federations Cup as well. Just this kind of spotty defense that can give up an ugly goal throughout the game. And I think Mexico have been slightly unfortunate that those have come early. But maybe there's something fortunate in that, and they have plenty of time to respond, and these Mexico teams continue to respond to those early goals. So I don't know. I don't think there's really anything that Mexico is doing particularly egregious at the beginning of the game. They were sluggish, and I don't know necessarily what you do about that other than hope for better in the next game. And I don't know. I don't know how you get the guys to come out with a little more intensity, but I don't even know if that's really the case as much as they just keep giving up these goals early.
Yeah. At least in the attack, I mean, it was always felt like a privilege to be watching Elias Hernandez. That performance last night, that was a lot of fun. That was so much fun to watch. It was incredible just to see that his goal as well. He finished with a goal. He finished with 2 assists. But other than Elias Hernandez, Nayib, do you think that there was any other player who really stepped up or impressed you last night?
I think the 2 names that kind of stand out is Jesus Dueñas, who is sort of invisible. Maybe you really can't tell exactly what he gives to the team until you actually are right there and watching his movements. What I like about Dueñas is his vision of the game. He really knows where to put himself, where to slot in when someone's moving up. For example, let's say Gutierrez moves up. Well, that means that Dueñas moves a little bit back to keep that space closed. And you don't see that much when you see it on TV, but when you're live, you tend to see it. And of course, the other one is Rodolfo Pizarro, no, because of the movements, having that ability to move back and ask for the ball and move forward. I think it's something that stands out, especially when Orbelín Pineda comes in, and also Gutierrez, because Gutierrez played with him in Pachuca, and Orbelín also, over there in Chivas. So that connection or that triangle, it stands out, and it's really dangerous. It's hard to stop for any team because these 3 are moving around and you really don't know where they're gonna move. So I think that's something to look forward in the next games. And also I think another name I would put out there was Molina, because he brought in the stability that perhaps Burrito Hernandez didn't provide. I don't know what happened to Burrito there. I mean, I think if it was the game, the opportunity, overwhelmed, I don't know what it really was. But Burrito tends to be constant in the central defensive midfield. But yesterday he looked overwhelmed because of the pressing. Also, El Salvador's pressing was good, but it wasn't going to last the 90 minutes, and I think we saw that at the end of the match.
Yeah, and as soon as they started pressing some more during that second half, that gave Mexico so much space. And some of those names that you just mentioned, that's when they really started to stand out. Jason, one of those names that did stand out once again was Elias Hernandez. I mean, we've brought him up multiple times, but you can't help but bring him up after that performance that he had. He's just incredible. It was so much fun to watch. Do you feel like Mexico has missed out on him in the past? Maybe the Confederations Cup. I don't know if that's a stretch or not, but just looking back, because this isn't a young and promising name. This is a guy who, if ever he's either 29 or 30, has Mexico missed out on him?
I don't think so. I mean, I think he's been there. I think like there's a case to be made that he was kind of a victim of the shuffling of heads of the national team for a while there. I mean, he certainly seemed to be someone who was in the mix, early on in his career, and somewhere kind of got lost there. And I think, during that 2014 World Cup campaign, he wasn't really a key component in that. And I think he kind of, as the manager shuffled, he kind of got lost in the shuffle somewhere there. But at the same time, he's playing a position that is stacked in the national team. I mean, Mexico has had a lot of options for many years in those positions, and it's just a hard position to break through. And the way he's playing right now, there's a case to be made that he should be in that main team, or at least contending for it, seeing minutes, and not necessarily just relegated to this B team. But I don't think Mexico's really missed out on it. I think in some ways he's kind of, coming on a bit little later on, like an Oribe Peralta a little bit as well.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So I mean, before we start looking ahead to the next matches in the Gold Cup, I'm going to go to both of you on this, but let's first go to Nayib. Just any final thoughts about that? That win from Mexico. I've seen some people say that the defense was a little worried. I mean, by some people, I am also including myself. I was a little worried about the defense from El Tri, especially in that first half. But just any thoughts in general before we move on to looking at the future Gold Cup matches.
Well, the defense is something to note, and right now there's gonna be switches on the defense. I think Osorio will use these group stage matches to give opportunities to everyone. And one name that has been, acclaimed a lot is Cesar Montes. The belief that Cesar Montes deserves to be a starter at some point because he's demonstrated in league play that he's capable to play in the big moments. The other name that stands out is Mayorga. I mean, you call Mayorga, who hasn't debuted in first division yet, there's this notion that he's at one point has to get the shot, or why are you calling him in? So it will be interesting to see, for example, Mayorga, he'll use him as a center back, or actually as a left back. So I think that is something to look ahead. And with Elias Hernandez, I do agree with what Jason said about how he can sort of compare to Peralta And I would make the argument that based on what we've seen this summer, I think Elias is in way better level than Jürgen Damm.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think because what happens with Jürgen Damm is always that last pass and that decision making that is not sharp. With Elias Hernandez, I'm seeing that pass. Yesterday, that pass that he gave to Orbelín Pineda and Dargo, it wasn't directed at the central to striker. It was actually going to the last post, to the far post, because he saw Orbelín coming out by himself. So those type of decisions that are sharp, it makes you believe that he can potentially take that spot away from Jürgen Damm, because right now Jürgen Damm, he's in Tigres and he has on and off moments, but he's not that consistent. And we're seeing consistency from Elias Hernandez in a position that you need to be sharp when you're giving minutes.
Yeah.
And really, I mean, like, I think you saw like that kind of that killer instinct.
Yeah.
Just get in that box and get it done. And so that, I mean, if one thing is lacking from Jürgen Damm's game, that's it right there, right? Isn't it just getting in there and getting it done? And that's just the thing we haven't seen from him.
And it's not even like Elias, like he just stepped up in this game, like, oh, suddenly, like, oh, he did well in this Gold Cup match. Like the last two friendlies for Mexico, I would have.
And even in the Croatia game, Cesar, you were there. He was probably one of the best players.
No, he's been stepping up recently for Mexico, so he's been carrying a lot of momentum. And honestly, I've been saying, like, I wouldn't be surprised if he finished as maybe not the top goal scorer, but like as one of the members of the best 11 for the entire Gold Cup. It's just, I don't know, he's been a very exciting player to watch. Jason, just to close out on the Mexico and Salvador match, just your final thoughts as well for Mexico from this match on Sunday night.
Like I think we're kind of continuing to see the same trend where this Mexico is getting the result and making us a little bit nervous at the same time. And it makes me, I'm just like a little bit nervous. I know we're going to get into the coming matches, but we kind of see the trend now with this, a result in a shaky way that it happened. And then we're going to Jamaica in the next match. And I don't know, it's just like giving me a little bit of a scary flashback moments heading here, but I'm trying to remain positive, but it's getting harder and harder.
All right, so speaking of Jamaica and Curacao, let's look forward to those matches. I'm gonna go over to you, Naib. After this first match, which was, I would say, I described, someone asked me in the press box, so they said, give me a one-word description of Mexico's performance, and I said, decent. And I think that was fair. That wasn't exciting. It wasn't poor. It was decent. So, do you think Mexico would need to adapt or change, for these upcoming matches? And if so, like, how would they need to adapt or change?
No, I think we have to look, for example, the game against Trinidad, the one that they got a 1-0 win over there in Trinidad, and how it was a 1-0 win off a corner kick header from Diego Reyes. The way that sort of Osorio implemented basically two central defensive midfielders. I think it was Molina and Reyes, if I'm not mistaken. So that type of formation that, 4 center backs type of deal, kind of, I'm already trying to get into Osorio's mind. Is that correct? I don't know if that's correct. I might go totally wrong, but that's how he usually tends to do these type of things. And even if you don't agree with them, that's what might happen, But of course, if it can be as simple as having 2 fullbacks, 2 center backs, a defensive mid, your attackers, simple as that. But sometimes with Osorio, you just don't know what's going to happen. But I do expect, for example, maybe Cubo Torres being in the 11 because he might be good in the headers. But that is just something that we will have to see exactly in the game against Jamaica, which is a repeat of the 2015 final.
Yeah, no, that's definitely good to point out that it was a repeat of that final from that tournament, which, I don't know, sometimes I just don't like to bring up that 2015 tournament. It just wasn't the best performance. I'm gonna say it wasn't. It just was not like a good performance from Mexico, and it's just, I feel like Guardado clearly carried us through that tournament. Jason, on paper, Mexico shouldn't have much problems against Jamaica and Curacao, even though it's a B team, especially on that Sunday match against Curacao. But so what do you think the expectations are for Mexico? What would your expectations be for the national team?
Well, I mean, my expectations are that Mexico will continue to struggle but find a way to get a result, because I think this just kind of seems to be the trend. And I think Osorio is he's a lucky manager at times here with some of these results he's gotten. But I don't know. For the Jamaica match, I'm a little more concerned with that because we've seen it before. We've seen Mexico struggle with Jamaica before, and that was with a better roster, to be honest. I'm a little worried about Jamaica's attack and our defense. I think they have some proven scores. A lot of MLS players on that roster, and some proven scores. So I think there could be some Jamaica goals. So I think this could be a troublesome match for Mexico. And, we mentioned it before, but I'm a little concerned about the forward position for Mexico because, we don't have a true striker in there. And I think we're going to need to be scoring goals. And we saw against El Salvador, maybe it doesn't matter, and that we could find those goals other ways. But I'm a little worried because I don't necessarily think that Kubo is the answer either. So I think we could have some trouble in these matches, but I certainly expect Mexico to proceed and move on to the knockout rounds without too much difficulty.
I feel like that's really something worth talking about is that striker position, that number 9 position, especially when, it seems like Pizarro did quite well as almost like a false 9. What would you think would be most ideal? And Naive, what do you think is most ideal for Mexico right there? Is it starting Kubo? Is it giving Kubo maybe the start for the rest, not the rest of the tournament, just most of the matches? Do we go with Sepúlveda up there? Do we go with Barragan? What do you think was best for Mexico in that striker position?
Well, I think, it's interesting in Kubo's case because he was literally left out of the final list. And the reason he's in is because Pulido got injured and then Peralta was the next option. But Club America was like, no way, Jose, I'm letting Peralta go for another summer tournament after letting you take him to Russia. So then in came Kubo. He's scoring goals in MLS. It's 12 goals already with the Dynamo. The possibility to play with one sole striker and have, Elias Hernandez on the right and Rodolfo on the left. It gives you that opportunity. But I just think that false 9 idea is something that could potentially work. It looks it's good to the eye. I think the chemistry that, for example, when I said in the beginning of the show with Guti, Pizarro, and Orbelin, that's just is great football, and it's tough for these defenses to stop that because they usually play on the ground, which is technically what makes Mexico a good team because they can play well on the ground. They really don't rely on crosses into the box and headers. So it will be if Osorio likes too much experimenting, this is probably one of the best experiments he can possibly make, playing with a false 9 because there are options to play with a false 9 in Mexico. You got someone like Carlos Vela who could play as a false 9, but he never tested that in the Confederations. But here, there's more leverage. I think, I think it's not the end of the world if, for example, they lose in the semifinals. I would say, even if in Mexico they say, "Oh no, it's a must win, must win." No, at the end of the day, we know that this is a B team, and that it's a team that Osorio is looking for 4 to 6 players that could compete for a World Cup spot next year.
Yeah, Jason, what do you think about that front line?
Well, I wonder if I don't know. I wonder if we'll see a center back maybe up there at some point in that false 9 position. Because
that's an opportunity right there
for the proper Osorio lineup. But no, I agree wholeheartedly with what Naib said. I think there's something there, and I think that is a proper experiment that is worth rolling with because I think Kubo is a fine striker, but I don't think he's necessarily someone we're looking at for the World Cup. And I don't think he's someone that we want to just plug in and say, well, he's a 9, put him in there, it's done. I like having Pizarro on the field. I like Pizarro using that, being in that false 9 position, certainly in that second half with Orbelin in there. I think it makes a lot of sense because they have that connection. And I think it could produce goals, and that's what it's all about. It doesn't really matter how you get them as long as you're producing them. So I think you can leave that position blank. Now, we'll get to it a little bit later about some of the reinforcements that Mexico could possibly make, and I think that would be a position that makes sense to do so.
Yeah. Just when Pizarro, I feel like he had a little bit, speaking of sluggishness, I think that first half he was a little off, maybe his touch was a little off, but by the second half, he was just making such beautiful passes, just really incredible moments. This was just perfectly weighted lobs going forward. And I think he was a part of there was this moment in the second half. I think it was Dueñas who almost scored a goal, and it was this incredible buildup. It was one of the best goals I've seen like Mexico scored this year. And if Dueñas would have scored that, I mean that would have just I don't know, and I would have jumped out of my seat again, just like that Elias Hernandez goal. But yeah, but it just kind of highlights the fact that it, just like Nayib was saying, it wasn't a crossover to the winger and then seeing what they could do with the ball. It was just this beautiful interplay between everyone in the middle, and Pizarro was a big part of that. And if, like Nayib said, if Osorio wants to experiment with that, I mean, especially maybe against Curaçao, let's say against Curaçao, where it's not going to be a daunting opponent, maybe that would be a good time to try that.
And that's a good point that you brought up about Dueñas, because in the Liguilla, what we saw what Dueñas did great in the Liguilla is how he put himself into the box as another forward, kind of. The movements into the box were on point all the time, and he did that in that play that you just mentioned. It just didn't. It was a good stop, I think, from the goalkeeper.
That was so unfortunate just to not see that go through. All right, well, guys, before we talk about the potential roster changes, I just really quickly, I want to get your predictions. I'm just going to put you on the spot. We didn't prepare for this. This isn't on our schedule, our rundown. But I'm going to ask each of you. I want you to give me not only what you think the result will be for each match, but also where Mexico will finish in the group stage. So I'm going to go over to Jason, putting you on the spot. Yikes. Give me the scoreline result for match against Jamaica Curaçao, and where Mexico is going to finish in the group.
Okay, so I'll take Mexico 2-1 over Jamaica. Late winner. How about that? And Curaçao. I don't know. Let's go Mexico 5-1. 5-1. A whole bunch of goals just to make it exciting. So they finish the top of their group, I assume, after that. Yeah. And go play someone else.
All right, Nayib, same question.
Yeah, I think I'll go similar as Jason. I mean, I think I'll go with 2-1 against Jamaica and maybe 3-0 against Curaçao. But with Jamaica, I think it will be a win-win if, for example, they don't concede a goal. I mean, I think that stability defensively might be crucial. But then again, I think about it, I'm like, he's gonna switch the back line for the next game. So what's the point of having a shutdown if that defense is not gonna move to the next game? So that's where it all comes down. I mean, this rotation policy mess up these kind of things. You can't expect that 10 defenders all of a sudden from one game to the other are gonna keep a 0, because it's new. It's a new block, and they gotta sort of understand where each of them move. So it really ruins this whole deal of let's not concede a goal. But if you don't concede a goal in this game, it's probably the next game it probably won't work the same way. So we'll see exactly how it works out.
Yeah, I'll go with a 1-0 against Jamaica. Mexico wins, sneaking past with a goal in the second half. And I think there are gonna be some strange formation set up against Curaçao, just based this off the fact that that the most experimental, not only starting 11, but just the formation in the Confederations Cup was against New Zealand, which was supposed to be an easy opponent. So I'm going to go with, and it's probably dumb to say this, I'm going to say 6-2. It's probably not going to be that. That's probably like a 10% chance it's going to happen. But just for fun, I'm going to say 6-2 because I think there's going to be something that might get a little weird. I think that match might get a little weird on Sunday. All right, guys, let's look over at the roster changes. According to the regulations for the Gold Cup, after the group stage, rosters can make up to 6, or squads can make up to 6 changes for the roster. Osorio, in a press conference on Saturday, stated that he wasn't looking into making any changes. But I'm going to ask you guys, say you're Osorio. Say there's some sort of like Freaky Friday situation going on. You like wake up, maybe you guys switch notebooks or something. I don't know. You like bump into each other and switch notebooks, and that's just how you guys switch places. You're Osorio, and if you had that position, would you make any changes to the roster? And if so, what roster, what players would you substitute for Mexico in the next round? And I'll go over to Jason first on this.
I'd just look at the forward position, and I'd bring in someone a little more reliable. I know Uribe's on that 40-man roster, and it's kind of mean, being that he was over at Russia. But I'd grab him and bring him in. I think someone like Uribe, just a more reliable, someone we know striker, could be up there, can get it done. We could plug him in, especially as we move on in the tournament. Who can just we know what we're getting from Uribe. So And certainly with all of those dynamic midfielders behind him, feeding him balls, I think it would make a lot of sense. And I don't know, as far as the player to leave off, I don't know, it's pretty mean to say Kubo, but that's probably who I would leave off at this point. I'm not a believer, but I am in Uribe, obviously. So that'd be my one switch, my one and only switch, if I could make a switch.
Naive, would you make any roster changes?
Well, I think the Peralta does make sense from the one that Jason said. I mean, because of what he represents, and if Piojo Herrera is making the trips to, comment in Univision and whatnot, why can't Peralta come for several games?
That's true.
Play for that's probably the deal that they might do. I mean, but we'll see exactly how that works out. I think another one that I would like to see is take out Sepúlveda and put in Gael Sandoval from Santos.
Yeah.
I think Gael Sandoval is a player that should have been in this roster because of what he did last season with Santos, because of what he represents. I mean, he's actually nominated to be the Rookie of the Year, and he's battling against Diego Lainez. I think, Lainez is a phenom that just came out 4 months ago, while Sandoval is a project that has been going on for a year. So I think Sandoval is of the year. If we look at the numbers and the time that both players, Lainez and Sandoval, have been playing on the field, of course, both are great talents for Mexican football. But I think Sandoval there for Sepúlveda, and Peralta maybe for Barragán. I'll keep in Cubo.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of what you just said there for Sandoval, just because I was so impressed with him. I mean, like, just with the amount of minutes he got, and also the assists that he got. I know people were brought up with, like, oh, they're off like set pieces and whatnot. They're off corners, off free kicks, but still, that still gives me a good reason to wanna bring him in. I was very impressed with him, and I was a little disappointed that he wasn't in that final roster. So I mean, just based off that press conference, off that question, actually, Tom asked, our buddy Tom, of course, asked that question on Saturday. And Osorio stated that he doesn't plan to be making any changes, but who knows what will happen. Maybe if there's some poor performances during this next week, maybe there's something that happens during the next few days. But it doesn't look like any changes will be made. But of course, we got to keep an eye on that. And a little bit of a tangent before we talk about Liga MX stuff. We were talking about this before the show, and it might just be kind of fun to bring up. But just what are your guys' thoughts on if you're an America fan, you see Piojo doing commentary stuff, and we got the season starting, in under 2 weeks. I mean, wouldn't that? I don't know. I'm just not. If I was an America fan, I wouldn't be that comfortable with the idea that my manager, who's supposed to be preparing for the preseason, I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts on that? I know it's not that big of a deal, but I just feel like it's interesting. I feel like it's just kind of worth noting.
Stuff that happens in Liga MX.
Yeah, maybe that's probably the best way of just saying it. It's just stuff that happens in Liga MX. It's just I don't know.
It was a little surprising. I was at the America preseason match on Saturday night, and CPO on the sidelines there, and then the next day, television, and there he is sitting in San Diego. Just like, okay, that came as a bit of a shock to me. But I guess they have. I guess they fully discussed this. I assume, but it's a little surprising. I suppose Liga MX preseason is probably not super vital for the manager's presence. I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll see exactly. Yeah. So real quick, I mean, the team so far, I saw the game against Santos a couple of days ago. America Santos, great preseason game. They got the 3-2 win. The team is looking fine. I think there's still developments going on. It's just the fact that Piojo sort of feels, untouchable. I mean, it seems like the guy can do whatever he wants. And now he's an American, and his ego, which is a big one, it gets bigger because he's an American. So will it affect? Maybe. But right now in preseason, they're actually looking fine.
That's true. And Jason, can you tell us anything from that match? I'm sure, I don't know. I think you went there as a fan, but just not saying like, oh, tell us what the starting 11 was. Like, tell us what was interesting, just like tactically, but just like anything from the match, even if it was just like, what the crowd was like or anything, but just from that match, which was held where was it?
It was in Philadelphia in the Union Stadium.
Okay, nice. Yeah.
And no, it was just interesting to see Pio and his 5-3-2 back there in America, and seeing Paul out there on the wing in the 5-3-2, like it looked good. And then slotting Guido Rodriguez into the middle there in that 5-3-2. it's going to be formidable. I mean, they looked good. I still think, they were missing a few players, obviously, but up top, Uribe is going to be very important for them still. So I think that's the one area, much like this Mexico team, that's just a little bit lacking. But they look good. I think they're going to be a real contender for sure. So
I can't tell you the amount of times that people would ask me, just because Guido Rodriguez was over here in Cholos, people on Twitter would be like, "Is he Mexican? Is he Mexican?" Hopefully, they're just hoping, like, is that guy Mexican? Please be Mexican. Nope, I'm sorry, Guido Rodriguez is not Mexican. He trained with the Argentine national team over the summer. All right, guys, we're already talking about Liga MX. So let's jump right into it. Now, after the roster changes that you saw this summer, which teams are you most excited to watch in this upcoming season? The season which starts next week. I know it's going to be next week and not this upcoming weekend, but the one following that. Once the season starts, it might be chaotic with so much Gold Cup and Liga MX stuff. But Nayib, which teams are you most excited to see?
No, I would have to agree there with Jason on America. With Guido Rodriguez and what he brings to the table to America. I mean, I think America hadn't had a consolidated defensive midfielder of this sort for quite a while. So I think now that they have this piece, they can sort of move forward. Darwin Quintero is going to be an interesting case because it's been rumored for the past 2 off seasons that he's going to be shipped away, but he still maintains himself in the club because of his price tag. We'll see how he does this season. We'll be able to revitalize him. I mean, which is going to be a heck of a story if that happens, because it looks like Quintero has never been able to make a positive impact in the team. Pachuca, with Edson Puch, I think will also be interesting. They also got Zagal, who was also in the Chilean national team over there in Russia, and they're coming in, post-life without Chucky Lozano. Santos, they didn't really make that many big signings, I would say. They maintained the block, but I just think that all these youngsters that they have in, Sandoval, Rivas, Jorge Sanchez, Arteaga, Ronaldo Cisneros, Antuna is another name that comes up. These are a lot of great youngsters produced in Santos Academy. And I think at one point the team is going to look strong. I think there's a big lesson that they learned last season, how they got eliminated in the Liguilla against Toluca. So that's going to be something to keep an eye. And I'm also intrigued of what happens over there with Cruz Azul, with Paco Gemes. I mean, they brought in this Spaniard, Edgar Mendez, and he made a debut with an assist and a goal, but it's just preseason. And then we'll see how it moves along, though.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. Jason, are you going to go straight into Cruz Azul? Are you interested by Cruz Azul, or are there other teams too that you're keeping an eye on?
I am interested. I'm not necessarily excited. But I'm certainly invested. But we'll see. We'll see on that one. As far as the teams that I'm excited to watch, I think like with Monterrey and Pachuca, 2 teams that we expect to be 2 of the better teams again. I think some of the retooling they did, it'll be interesting to see how it all kind of works out for them. But certainly 2 teams you'd expect to be powers again. But 2 teams are already extremely fascinating to watch, and I expect to see that once again.
Yeah, and I think I got to give. I mean, clearly I've been following them just because they're like, I want to say down the street, but Xolos, I got to give them a little bit of shout out too, because I think that after they dropped a significant amount of players, or not, it's not a significant amount, but just key players from that roster. But there seems to be a lot of excitement from about an addition, Gustavo Bull, who everybody outside of Mexico seems to be really excited about. He seems to have like a lot of potential. People kept saying, just like, no, he should be going to Xolos, he should be going to Europe. So let's see if he lives up to the hype. I think I'm really excited about Monterrey and seeing Aviles Hurtado there. If he can like gel with that team, if he could gel with that attack, I mean, that might get a little scary for Liga MX opponents. I know we talk about
and Jorge Benitez, who couldn't score in Cruz Azul, and watch he comes to Monterrey and starts scoring. That'd be kind of strange. It could possibly happen.
It could happen. People talk about Tigres too, just about what they have, and I know they have a stacked attack, but just like, God, man, what they're doing up there in Monterrey, by Monterrey I mean, but just like Tigres and Los Rayados, that's just like the new epicenter of just exciting soccer right now.
No, and Tigres is insane, because Ener Valencia came in, and now Gary Medel. it's rumored to take over Guido Pizarro's place. It's like, come on, man, you let go of Guido Pizarro and then you bring in Gary Medel. That's only stuff that Tigres can do.
Crazy.
That's incredible, yeah.
No, it's incredible. I think Necaxa, they seem to be making some interesting changes. Not enough. I don't know if they're going to be like title contenders, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were sneaking in around like 7th or 8th place in the playoffs. And of course, just what Pachuca will do, just with, I mean, as I mentioned, just Edson Puch there on the team is just that's gonna be incredible to see if he can work well with that attack, just like I was talking about Aviles with Monterrey. Guys, I know there hasn't been a single match, there hasn't been a single second of Liga MX football, but just right now, just based off of the roster changes that you've seen, just off of what your expectations are, I want to hear what your top 4 will be. Just in what you think will, like, how it'll end at the end of the regular season. I know it's expecting a lot, but let's see what happens. Jason, what's your top 4?
So my top 4, I'd have to, you have to say Tigres, right? I mean, just the roster, all the talent. I mean, they're going to be there, whether they win it or not. It's going to be up in the air, but they're going to be there at the end. I would say America. I have faith for PO to kind of bring them back into contention and for them to be there. I think some of the additions they made, as you mentioned, with Guido Rodriguez coming in, I think is going to be a huge addition for them. So I expect them to be contending and be one of the stronger teams in the league this year. It might take them a little time to come into form, but I think that by the end of the season, they'll be one of the few teams left. I would say Pachuca. As I mentioned them earlier, I think the Chucky loss is big, but I think they're actually going to be still strong. There's so much use in that team. The team's obviously so much more than just Chucky. So I expect them to kind of almost step it up a little bit and kind of spread out some of the responsibilities for the big plays and the goals. So I expect Pachuca to be there. And kind of going off what Nai mentioned, I have Santos in there too. I think and this is a team that you didn't really see a lot of offseason moves from. I mean, they've just kind of stayed firm with what they've had, but what they've had is working and it's developed, and you have all these youngsters coming up through the team, and I kind of see them kind of starting to really gel and grow and to be one of those contenders at the end of the season. Not necessarily going to win the title, but I expect them to make a little bit of a run.
Now, what would your top 4 be, or do you agree a little bit there with Jason? Would you have some changes there in that top 4?
Look, I kind of agree with what Jason said, but just to give the privilege to the defending champion Chivas, I know that they won't have Pulido to start off the season, so that means that a youngster in the youth academy has to step up and put in the goals. Of course, that you can also say that Saldivar will have to be healthy at the start of the season, so the loss won't be that evident. But they're defending champions. The block is still there. The growth of Pizarro will continue. I would say the growth of Orbelin. Of course, if all of a sudden a European club comes in and says, "Oh, I'm willing to pay Orbelin's transfer clause," well, that's going to be kind of interesting to see. You never know; it might happen. But with Orbelin and Pizarro, Saldivar, I think Chivas is still a team to be reckoned with, and it's the team that's meshing. But the teams that Jason said, I agree with them, the 4 of them.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out mine. I'm tempted to say something as exciting as number 1, Monterrey, number 2, Tigres, number 3, America, number 4, Chivas, because that would be incredible if we had those 4 at the top. But at the same time, I think you gotta. I'm still trying to figure out if you want to squeeze in Pachuca there at the same time. But I think I'll stick with. I think at the very least, I think that Monterrey is going to finish in first. I'm still a little not sure about the 2, 3, 4, 5 after that. But I just think that, like I said, I think when you have someone like Aviles, who is, I think, one of the best players, if not the best player during the regular season last season, if he can incorporate that, if he can assimilate into the Monterrey roster and support that roster, it's just going to be incredible to see what he can do there. So I'm really looking forward to that. But yeah,
going out like what we've seen from them lately, like you wouldn't be surprised if they finish as number 1, and also wouldn't be totally shocked if they finish 8 or 9 at the same time, because it's just you don't totally know what's going to happen with that team going forward. It's a bit of a wild card, so it's going to be really fascinating to watch them.
Yeah, no, that'll be interesting to see. But guys, let's see. It looks like we're might be wrapping up the show. I know I probably went through all this stuff a little too quickly, but it's okay. We'll we'll be covering more Liga MX next week. Obviously, we still have plenty of time for the upcoming season. But before that, I first want to give a little more information about our guest. Jason, where can we find you? And also, where have we seen your recent work? I saw actually it was a really good article on Blanco recently that you had on 442. But yeah, just like where can we find you? Tell us some of your stuff from recent.
At Soccer Americana on Twitter. I see it there on the bottom. And subscribe to my newsletter, Soccer Americana Weekly.
Yeah, there we go. Yes, yeah.
Put that out every week. Find what it seems like the best writing in English about the Mexican game every week. Subscribe. You can find it on my Twitter, pinned tweet at the top. Go in, 1 email a week, just good stories and all that good stuff. So yeah, go in there, subscribe. That'll be great.
Yeah. Always great stuff. And maybe I'm just saying that because sometimes my stuff will appear there. But yeah, always good stuff. Naive, tell us where we can find your work. What you've been doing recently. Obviously, you've been doing some stuff at ESPN and covering the Gold Cup too. But just where we can find your stuff. And also after that, I'm going to put another bit of responsibility on your shoulders. I'm going to have you close out the show. Whether it takes a minute for you to do this, but it takes you 30 minutes. It's all up to you, man.
30 minutes takes.
There you go, Naive. It's all yours,
definitely. Man. Right here on Twitter, I post everything. And of course, it's been an interesting days because we saw Andrés Guardado move to Real Betis from PSV. And then, of course, the Guillermo Ochoa to Standard Liège. Now, the one from Ochoa has been confusing. And I will have to agree, it's difficult to understand. But, the reasoning behind it kind of makes sense, as he sort of wants to be finally at a club that is really not fighting for, avoiding relegation. I think that is something to keep an eye on. Hopefully Standard will be able to compete against Anderlecht, Club Brugge, which are the two main ones as of late over there in the Jupiler Pro League. So let's see what happens there with Ochoa, what happens there with Guardado back in La Liga. And let's see, moving forward, who else might be moving to Europe? By the looks of it, it looks like the market might be quite quiet at the moment. But let's see with Raúl Jiménez and Javier Chicharito Hernández, because those are probably the two players that right now we might not see. I mean, of course, with Raúl, we have this rumor that he's going to Everton. I mean, that's what they're saying out there. But with Chicharito, we still kind of don't know what path he might be taking. So. That will be interesting to see, and we'll of course talk about it over here in the Mexican Soccer Show.
Yeah, so let's see if we see any of those potential big changes. Let's see also how Mexico will do this week as well, and let's see if there's anything. I mean, there's just so much going on, and also with Liga MX, which is just starting just around the corner. It's just an incredible amount of stuff it just seems to never end. I told my girlfriend at the end of the Liga MX season, it's like, oh, it's going to be like a summer break. It's going to be awesome. We'll hang out. I'm sorry. I apologize. There's just so much always going on with Mexican soccer. But thank you, Naive. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, everyone who watched this. Thank you, everyone who was on the chat. Until next time, we'll see you on the next edition of the Mexican Soccer Show.